Have you ever finished something that comes in a cool container and then you keep that container because you think it's cool and you'll probably do something with it in the future, but then you don't actually do anything with it and it just sits there in a box for years doing nothing? Today, I'm going to take that empty container and finally make something cool with it. Let's get started, shall we? Now I could just keep it as is, but I'd like to make it a little taller, so I'll unscrew it, I'll flip the top to the bottom, and then I'll add a resin cast piece that I had to give a more rounded shape to the top. This is just a resin offcast from a previous project. I also sand down all the parts to make sure that the glue and the paint will stick later, especially on these metal parts. That resin cap from earlier does fit nicely into the lid, but the issue is it's not fully centered and there's a bit of a wobble. So to solve that, I take this other piece of a plastic ring that fits nicely around the base of the resin, and this will give me a slightly larger circumference that will match up with the lid a bit better. I've been wanting to finish off the rest of my epoxy putty as it was getting a little old and hard to work with, so I mixed up the final bit and add it to the cap to fill the negative space and give me a bit more surface area to glue to. I end up removing part of the base, and this is where the legs will attach. For that, I'll be using this toy part here, which already has some great articulation and will work as the hip joints for my robot. As you can see, they're a bit too small to fit right now, so I'm going to take this other piece of plastic and I'll drill a hole in it, and this will act as a spacer to bridge the gap between the pieces of plastic. I'm starting to build up the legs here, and I'm using this piece of purple plastic, and I'm just going to cut off the end bit because that's all I'll need for this, and then I will glue it directly onto the hip joints, just like this. I just use normal super glue to attach everything here. I also add a couple of greeblies to cover up all my glue marks and to add some strength. For the bottom part of the legs, I'll be using some of these action figure toys, and I don't need this top part here, so I'll cut it off and I'll just use this bottom part as you can see here. I'll also drill a couple holes in the top, and these will be so I can add some pins that will give me some strength when I attach it like this to the rest of the legs. I use a hole punch and cut out some holes out of a piece of thin styrene, and I'll use that to cover up those pins that you can see there. For the feet, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to be using a couple of these breakaway clasps that I've cut in half, and I'm going to glue them to a piece of thick acrylic tubing like this. I'll glue them in this configuration so it makes sort of a claw shape, and then on top I'll add a wooden bead that I cut in half. And to attach them to the legs, I'll be using a piece of armature wire. The rest of the project comes together pretty simply. I just glue the top to the bottom of the top, and then the bottom of the top to the bottom of the bottom. And then I'll glue some blasters to the side. I use my Dremel tool and a sanding drum to sand the side of those spacer washers so that they fit flush against the side of the robot. I'm going to leave the blasters separate for now though to make it easier to paint. Using some small brass tubes, I make a couple of antennae and add those to the top of my robot. To prepare everything for painting, I add them to a few painting stands, and then I will give everything a coat of flat black primer from a rattle can. After the primer has dried, I can give everything a dry brush with a silver acrylic paint. I do this dry brushing over everything, even though a lot of this is going to be covered in paint later, because as of this point, I still don't know where all that paint is going to go, and so this gives me a good base to work from. I decided that since this was made out of a Carmex container, I would use the Carmex colors. So I'm going to start with the white as a base. I'm going to be using this dark vermilion red as the red, and that matches pretty well on its own. And then for the yellow, I'm going to be using this deep yellow, but it is a bit too yellow, and so I'm going to add a little tiny bit of this yellow green, and I think mixed together I can get a better color match. As with many of my projects, the colors that I choose don't quite show up on the black base as well as I would have liked, so I add a white base to help the colors pop more. So anywhere where I know I'm going to add color, I add a white base. This may seem like a lot of work up front, but it actually saves me time later because with this white base down, I don't have to put as many layers of color. And now that we are in the painting process of the video, I get the honor to thank my patrons. Thank you so much for your support, I really do appreciate it. If you too would like your name flying across the screen during the painting process, you can join my Patreon. I'll have links at the end of this video, in the description, and on my page. Not only do you get a shout out in every single one of my videos, but you also get access to some cool behind the scenes footage each week from my projects. There's absolutely no pressure to join, but if you would like to support me more directly, that is a great way of doing so. Another way to support me in the channel that is totally free is to like, subscribe, and comment on these videos. I read every single comment and I try to reply to them if I can. And if you're liking this video, I've got a bunch of other videos on my channel that are very similar. So if you're enjoying yourself now, please go check out those other videos after this one is done, of course, and see if you like those ones as well. The rest of the painting is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to let you enjoy that, and I will come back when I need to say something. Once the painting is complete, I can put the two halves together, and it was at this point that I realized that something was missing. This robot has no way of seeing anything. There's no eye. So I'm going to build one. For the eyeball itself, I'm going to use this half wooden sphere, and then for the rim around the eye, I'm going to use this piece of plastic. And they fit together pretty nice. Once the eyeball is painted, I glue it in place, and at this point I realize that this whole thing kind of looks like a robot minion. This color combination is also not my favorite to work with. I think it looks kind of cheap, and so I'm hoping that all the weathering that I do will bring everything together and make it look a little more realistic. This first layer of weathering is a wash. It's a mix of acrylic paints and water with a few drops of isopropyl alcohol. The isopropyl alcohol just breaks up the surface tension so that the water doesn't bead up on the surface of the paint. This wash gives me a good base weathering to work from. For the rest of the weathering, I'll be using a mix of these paints. Starting off with this metallic silver here, I'll be using that for a chipped paint effect. Then I'll move on to the rust tones. I'll be starting with these two darker brown rusts, and then I will finish it with this fresh rust on top. I'll add some final details with a mix of this brown contrast and oil stain in some of the cracks and crevices. I use that oil stain mix and add a couple of drip marks, and with that, this project is pretty much done. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like, consider subscribing. I've got a whole bunch of other videos on my channel, over 100 videos to be exact, so if you like this one, I'm sure you'll like at least a few more. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them down in the comment section below and I'll try to get back to you. One final big shout out to my patrons, I really appreciate you, and if you would like to join or are interested in checking it out, there'll be links in the description and at the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.